I woke up with a sick feeling in my stomach. His hand was on my back, the other trying to slip into my panties. My head ached, but not from yesterday's booze. "I don't like mornings, CJ," I muttered. "I'm sorry," he whimpered, but then added, "What about all those stories about you and Mark making love all night?" "I'm only 20, I grumbled. "Oh," he said sadly, his voice carrying the tone of a wounded puppy. It made me second-guess my decisions once more. At first glance, everything seemed perfect. I had traded a 40-year-old man absorbed in his work for a young guy who showered me with affection. Mark prioritized his career and our future, while CJ's attention was always on me. Mark wasn't controlling or aggressive, but we often argued when I defended my point of view. He'd just grin and walk away. Things weren't as they should have been. My father always believed that a happy wife meant a happy life, and he did everything he could to meet my mother's needs. But Mark looked at me in a way that made me feel insane. If I denied him intimacy, he shrugged it off and spent more time working on his car. I hated that Mustang. Strangely, the more I rejected him, the more talkative he became, just as my mother predicted. A few days after I started rejecting him, I noticed he was checking his watch more often. I also spotted a calendar in the kitchen with the upcoming weekend highlighted in red, along with several preceding days. When I rummaged through his sock drawer, I found a brochure for an elite Las Vegas brothel. Everything became clear. The brochure featured young, attractive women ready to please my husband. I was stunned. But what bothered me most was that he had already canceled our plans for the day, and it wasn't even noon yet. I wasn't naive. I knew what this meant. He'd leave me behind faster than his Mustang could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour. That night, I asked him to make love. I was angry, and that anger quickly turned to pain. He simply turned me down, his words quick and dismissive. He didn't even think it was worth acknowledging. As frustration built, I begged him, "Come on, Mark. It's been a week." "I'm not in the mood," he replied. "I can help you." I tried to smile, though it was hard. All I wanted was freedom from him. "Please, darling, let me satisfy you." "I'm not sure," he muttered. "It seems like you don't really want this." "Maybe in a week." I was shocked. It was the same cycle we always fell into. Despite trying everything I could to change things, Mark always had the upper hand. On the other hand, CJ adored me, seeing me as divine. He did everything I asked. But why didn't I leave Mark for CJ? There were two reasons. First, I still loved Mark deep down, despite his work ethic, lack of responsibility, and avoidance of intimacy. Second, CJ's financial instability. Despite his love for me, Mark had a 6-figure salary. Maybe that's why I stayed. Over the years, our once strong love had transformed into constant longing, then bitter resentment. As I thought about how our love had faded, CJ's touch invaded my thoughts. He gently stroked my legs, trying to cheer me up without causing harm. His touch always had an effect on me, but when Mark tried to replicate it, it irritated me. I asked CJ to massage my back, and he complied. I didn't tell him that his constant touching was making me uncomfortable, distracting me from what I needed to focus on. My breasts, once enhanced by surgery, felt less sensitive, unlike the way Mark used to touch me. Despite this, it was hard to believe he had never cheated on me. It was even harder to admit that he really loved me, then and now. If it weren't for his constant need to be right in every argument, I wouldn't even consider leaving him. If Mark had allowed me to take the lead, as I had hoped, we could have been much happier together. I was sure that if I had been in control, I would have been a content wife, and Mark would have been the happiest man alive. But instead, he often looked at me as if I was nothing. CJ was in a relationship with a woman who wanted to marry him. Although she wasn't his ideal match, they weren't married, and he realized it would be easy to end things with her. He seemed surprised by my understanding when I told him I got his point of view. Gently running his fingers over my body, CJ whispered that today was the day I should call him. Suddenly, everything fell into place. A plan we had been developing for weeks. With Mark out of town, it was the perfect time to act. Neither CJ nor I wanted to meet my husband and tell him about my decision to leave or file for divorce. The thought of it made me uncomfortable. I felt it was wrong to interrupt Mark while he was working hard to support our lifestyle. He deserved an honest conversation about our relationship. If we decided the marriage couldn't be saved, we could discuss divorce. Afterward, we'd both move on and find new relationships. It might not have been the noblest solution, but it was the decision we had made. In the 2 decades of our marriage, Mark never resorted to physical violence or shouting. Instead, he always sought compromise during disagreements, which sometimes frustrated me. He had a habit of agreeing too easily. If compromise wasn't possible, he'd grin playfully and walk away. Over the years, I had learned to interpret his subtle signals. Behind that mischievous smile was a message. Go to hell. You won't get anything if you don't agree. Who needs intimacy with a 40-year-old when I can have fun in Vegas? As my bitterness grew, I began planning what I would take in the event of a divorce. I wanted the house, my belongings, and most of his money. I also intended to claim half of his pension when he retired. I consulted with a lawyer, prepared the divorce papers, and discussed my plans with my mother and some friends. While they believed I might succeed, they warned me against going to such extremes. What upset me most was that even my own mother, who had always despised Mark, thought I was being unreasonable. Still, their disapproval only strengthened my resolve. My lawyer, motivated by greed, recommended using mental pressure and neglect as grounds for divorce. Though dishonest, this tactic gave me the independence and control over my life that I so desperately wanted. Despite my resentment toward Mark, I knew life would be difficult for him at first, but he'd recover. If I had taken the time to talk things through with him, he would have likely tried to compromise or convince me otherwise. Sometimes, extreme measures are needed to get someone's attention. Felt like now was one of those times. Taking a deep breath, I picked up the phone. The sound of trucks could be heard in the background, most likely from neighbors delivering furniture. I dialed the number I had memorized over the years. It rang once, and in the middle of the second ring, Mark answered. "Hello?" he said casually. I hesitated, guilt washing over me. "Mark," I said carefully. "Who else is there?" His casual tone eased some of my guilt. "Why are you calling me?" he asked, his voice expressing surprise. I realized he was right. I hadn't called him in years, except when I needed something. He had worked hard to provide for us, and I had mostly ignored him. Maybe this call would benefit both of us. Maybe I could let him keep more of his money for himself. "I'm calling because I'm your wife," I reminded him, my voice steady as I neared the end of this chapter. A rush of liberation swept over me, and beads of sweat trickled down my face. Just then, Shannon appeared, pulling me into a passionate kiss. Her touch overwhelmed me as I struggled to catch my breath. She held me tightly, and I couldn't resist her. "I can't resist, dear Shannon," I whispered between kisses. She giggled and kissed me again, her words tempting me further. "Be patient, my love. It will be worth the wait." I tried my best to hold onto my composure as she drove me to the edge of insanity. It was hard to believe it had only been 3 months since we first met. Just as I felt myself losing control, the phone rang, interrupting the moment. I glanced down to see Shannon, clearly enjoying herself, rolling her eyes and swinging her legs. "Oh, baby, this feels amazing," she murmured, clearly annoyed at the interruption. What are you doing to me, Shannon? I asked, barely able to catch my breath. I'm just trying to make you happy, she replied with a smile. Unable to resist, I confessed. I've been happy ever since I met you. Shannon grinned. You'll be even happier when we're done with this. I had expected the movers to call, but I had completely forgotten that they were supposed to notify me when they arrived. Shannon didn't get upset. She continued to playfully chat with me, stoking my excitement. Just as I was starting to fully enjoy the moment again, my phone rang once more. I glanced at the familiar number and exchanged a knowing look with Shannon. She met my gaze with a mix of amusement and a mischievous smile. After the call, Shannon rolled onto her back and snuggled up to me. I couldn't help but admire her figure. Her chiseled legs, heart-shaped back, and slim waist were captivating. It was as if she were a masterpiece, flawlessly sculpted. Her joke about God paying more attention to her bottom than her top made me laugh. And in that moment, I realized I was falling in love all over again. It was only the second time I had felt this way, but this love was completely different. She was like a phoenix rising from the ashes of my previous relationship. Let me start from the beginning. 3 months ago, I was in love with a woman who didn't feel the same way about me. We both knew it deep down, yet I still loved her. Really loved her. I was naive to think she loved me back. Though my marriage had its difficulties and we were constantly fighting, I thought it was just a normal stage for couples. The alarm went off when the secretary informed me about a visitor. Shannon entered my office and sat down, leaving me confused. What company do you work for? I asked. I'm from You and Me, she said. I'm here to avenge stupidity. I don't understand, I admitted. You will soon enough, she replied ominously. And it won't be easy, Mark. Your wife is cheating on you. She said it with such confidence that at first, I thought I had misheard her. Her tone left no doubt, as if she were simply discussing the weather. Deep down, I felt she was telling the truth. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. Sweat broke out on my forehead. My heart pounded, and tears threatened to spill. As soon as the floodgates opened, the tears started to fall. Embarrassed by my vulnerability, I hid my face, not wanting the red-haired woman to see my pain. Suddenly, the air around me filled with the scent of cherries. Gentle hands lifted my head, offering comfort and care. I'm so sorry, she whispered softly. I didn't expect this. I thought you'd react like I did when I found out. I thought you'd get mad and want to fight. Sitting on my desk, she looked at me with understanding. She gently placed my head on her lap and ran her fingers through my hair, soothing me. You love her, don't you? She asked. I shook my head. Even though she betrays you, never says anything nice about you, and spends her time criticizing and bossing you around, why do you still care so much about her? Her voice was gentle, but her words made me reflect. Is it because of her blonde hair and big breasts? CJ, she explained, also liked blondes with big breasts. Suddenly, our eyes met. I couldn't understand why I was so angry with Shannon. I loved her before she dyed her hair, I replied. And I paid for these improvements. She burst into laughter, catching me off guard. What's so funny? I asked. I'm just telling the truth, she replied. I understand you. My ignorant ex didn't realize that his ideal woman was mostly artificial. It must have cost you a lot to make her look like this. I shook my head, feeling confused. Despite that, my anger didn't subside. Shannon then revealed the truth, how she met CJ and what secret plans they had made. They thought they had found the perfect way to outsmart me and take most of my possessions. Shannon found herself in a similar, albeit less ethical, situation from the beginning. She had supported CJ even when he started relationships with women at the bar where he worked part-time, constantly searching for the perfect blonde with curves, someone he eventually found. Aside from the physical changes I financed, she seemed to give him a sense of maternal care. Shannon decided to hire a private investigator to gather information on CJ. I spoke with her representative, Sarah Price, several times before agreeing to her terms. Though it wasn't difficult to gather the information, it turned out to be useless to Shannon. Sarah, a stunning red-haired woman, repeatedly emphasized that since Shannon and CJ weren't married, the information didn't matter to her. CJ could have dumped Shannon without any consequences. On the other hand, I could use Sarah's evidence and records to support my position in the divorce proceedings and possibly reduce my financial settlement. After weeks of observation and planning, Shannon and I grew closer. One evening, everything changed. "Shannon, you deserve someone better than him. Just walk away and forget about her," I said. "I can't leave until they face the consequences. I won't let anyone forget me," Shannon reasoned, her determination clear in her eyes. "Hasn't revealing her plans already given you the upper hand? You're not emotionally attached to them like I am, so you're not trapped. You're young, stunning, and you still have time to find someone who will treat you properly," she added. Even in the dim interior of my Mustang, her green eyes sparkled. "You finally get it, don't you?" she teased playfully. "Get what?" I asked. "You were so focused on your wife that you didn't even realize I was a woman, let alone that you were interested in me." She giggled, her laughter charming me. It was moments like these that I loved about her. "Why do you think I'm staying here?" she asked. "I broke up with CJ a few weeks ago, and I no longer have the desire to take revenge. Helping you get justice is more important to me than getting back at that fool. I can't bear the thought of you being financially connected to these two scammers forever. We have to find a way to get rid of them." She came closer, hugged me, and unexpectedly kissed me. I was surprised, but I couldn't resist kissing her back. At the age of 40, with 20 years of marriage under my belt, I considered myself an expert in the art of kissing. But kissing Shannon was completely different. New, exciting, and full of a feeling that made me want more. Having lost our heads in the moment, we forgot about the tape recording that was capturing the infidelity of our partners. A voice suddenly interrupted us, breaking the silence. "Shannon, you're adorable together," Sarah remarked with a smile. "You two are better suited to each other than your current partners. Now that you're together, we can let these manipulators go. Eventually, they will face the consequences." "What about the divorce and our revenge?" Shannon asked. Sarah was surprised by the question, but she quickly explained some of the legal points. "The main question is, are you both ready to finish the job?" she asked. "Take the time to think. This is a serious decision. I'll send you the bill." The next weeks were spent perfecting our plan. Shannon and I worked together, refining our acting skills. We each told our partners about our busy work schedules, and we were surprised to find that they believed us. They had no idea that Shannon and I knew each other, let alone that we were romantically involved. This gave us more time together, contributing to the growth of our attraction, which eventually turned into deep love. One day, I called Shannon at her job and told her I was ready. "We're practically inseparable," I said. "You're stupid," she giggled playfully over the phone. "That's not enough," I replied. "We haven't even had intimacy yet." She whispered cautiously, remembering that she might be overheard at work. "I'm sure our lovemaking will be amazing," she assured me. "You have no idea," I said, but she added, "You know I don't have the same qualities as your wife." "Why should that matter?" I objected. "The true essence of making love is being with someone you love and want to please." With tears in her eyes and a trembling voice, she finally expressed her feelings. I love you too, Mark, and I promise it will always be like this. You can have all of me whenever you want. I'm yours. I was stunned. No one had ever expressed their love for me so passionately and eloquently. Not even my wife. I've never said those words to anyone before, I said solemnly. Not even that fool, CJ. I never doubted it, she assured me. I nodded, just as interested in when I could move on. We followed Sarah's strategy, and today's phone call was exactly what we had been waiting for. The funny thing about all this is that, despite careful planning, I genuinely believed fate had a hand in our meeting. Though we made sure not to be seen together for several weeks, friends continued to come to us, sharing their doubts about the infidelity of our partners. We pretended to be oblivious, and it felt like a comedy of errors. Everyone except CJ and my wife seemed unaware that we had figured them out. Eventually, the fictitious business trip I had planned took place. It may have been a deception, but it helped. Unfortunately, Shannon's mother fell ill at the same time. The scammers were led to believe that both of us were out of town, setting the stage for a crucial phone call. It didn't go as smoothly as we'd hoped. We expected the call to come on Friday evening, so I arranged for the truck to arrive on Sunday morning, giving the lovebirds a few days to enjoy each other's company before their plan unraveled. Despite the unexpected twist, Shannon and I savored the moment of victory. When I picked up the phone, I heard the familiar voice of my wife, who had been with me for over 2 decades. Who else is there? I joked. Shannon came over and hugged me, giving me a new sense of resilience. Why are you calling me? I asked. Because I'm your wife, she replied. Mark, my love, I have to tell you something. It might not make you happy, but I truly believe it will benefit both of us in the end. Despite the seriousness of the moment, I couldn't help but laugh. To my surprise, she burst out laughing too. Her reaction stunned me. It seemed like she was mocking me. CJ came downstairs to check on the noisy trucks, and I wished he were with me. What the hell are you laughing at? I demanded, my frustration rising. I'm serious. Someone told me the other day that you were going to leave me. He grinned, knowing how to get under my skin. But soon, you'll have to face this problem, he added, a challenge in his voice. This time I was determined to outsmart him. I have news for you, he continued, and soon you'll see what it is. Then you'll have to have dinner alone. What do you even want to say? I asked skeptically. I don't believe this was your idea. I'm sure this is CJ's plan. He chuckled. He found out about us somehow. Maybe from your nosy neighbors, he said, dismissing my concerns. I knew I had to do something to fix the situation. No, I couldn't back down now. I have to get through this, I said firmly. Mark, I've had enough. I want a divorce. I tried to sound as determined as possible, but he just laughed louder. Your letter made me stop and think, he said, almost mocking me. But apparently, you felt the need to fix the situation. His words sent a chill down my spine. Was this fool a psychic? No one knew about that damn letter. No one except me and CJ. The letter was supposed to be attached to the divorce papers, where I clearly expressed my feelings about our marriage and the mistakes we made. I had even told Mark what he needed to do to win me back. Mark, we really need to talk about this, I said quietly. Let's talk about it when you get home, he replied. But remember something, my dear, he whispered. Even when you look at the sky, you can see the stars and still not see the light. Mark, are you even listening? I exclaimed, shocked. I had called him to tell him it was over between us, but he was singing, pretending to be happy with my decision, trying to upset me. If you don't change, we'll get divorced, I warned. It's too late for that, dear, he replied sadly, and in the background, I heard a woman's voice whispering something. "It's never too late," I said. "Why do you think it's too late, Mark? And who is this woman next to you?" "I've already left," he sang, almost gleeful. "And I feel strong singing this victory song." "Oh my God. What do you mean you've already left?" I shouted into the phone. The terror I'd been feeling all morning suddenly intensified, like Wall-E Coyote just before the boulder falls on his head. I strained to hear his reply, but all I heard was the beeping sound. In panic, I dropped the phone onto the bed next to me just as CJ burst into the room, fear written all over his face. "Get dressed and go downstairs," he ordered. I quickly put on my robe and tied it securely. In the living room stood a confident woman with a tablet in her hand, the aura of ownership around her. "Who are you?" I demanded. "Get out of my house." She looked at me coldly and then turned away. "I feel generous," she said. "I understand you might feel anger and resentment in this situation, but you need to behave respectfully and leave by the end of the day. You have a little time to pack your things." "I'm not moving," I replied firmly. "This house belongs to me and my husband. We're almost done paying for it." "Really?" she said with a cold laugh. "CJ, call the police. This will speed things up." At that moment, it felt as though time stopped. I was reeling, trying to process everything. Then Hank K., Mark's close friend and my own friend, the chief of police, walked in. The woman handed him a stack of papers, and he nodded approvingly before walking over to me. He looked past me at CJ and asked, "Is that him?" Confused, I asked, "Who?" He calmed me down, trying to help me understand. "I'm just wondering if this is the person you left your husband for. It's very brave of you to bring him to Mark's old house." Before I could fully comprehend his words, the cheerful woman interrupted, asking, "Is that him?" She circled around CJ and then turned to me with a smile. "They said you were naive, but I had to find out for myself." "What are you talking about?" I asked, still trying to piece things together. "Half the women in the city are wondering why you left your husband for a man with less manhood and no income," she teased. Grinning, Tina said, "Maybe there's some truth to the rumors that silicone and a big chest affect the brain." "Let me explain," the police chief intervened, approaching CJ and beginning to interrogate him. "Hey, buddy, do you know what a woman says to a guy with a very big male organ?" CJ looked confused and replied, "No, I don't know." The chief chuckled. "How could you?" His words caused laughter between him and the plump woman standing nearby. "Can we continue?" the woman asked, wiping away tears from laughing. "Of course," the chief replied. "Pack your things and leave." "But Mark sold the house," I protested. "This is my home," I argued. "I decided to keep it, even though he paid for it." The chief intervened. "He bought it with his own money. The certificate of ownership has only his name on it, so he can do whatever he wants with it." "This is ridiculous. A woman always gets the house in a divorce," I objected. "Not necessarily," the chief replied. "Besides, you two aren't divorced yet." "You're right," I admitted. "I plan to file for divorce tomorrow. It should have been done last week when he was selling the house," the chief said with a grin. "Is this legal?" I asked. "It's a little mean," he replied. "It's like cheating on your spouse while they're working hard to provide for you, but it's legal." I muttered, "CJ, contact my lawyer. I need to reach the bank and our investment company," I said, pointing as her team started removing furniture from the house. "Where are they taking my furniture?" "Your husband donated it to a local charity auction house," she explained. "You can always buy it back." I hand-picked each piece of this furniture, arranged it and paid for it, I said, growing increasingly frustrated. "Maybe you should have contributed your share," Tina chuckled, ignoring my comment. I quickly dialed the bank's number. Carly, this is Clayton. Yes, Mark's wife, I said firmly. My lawyer will contact you soon to freeze our accounts, so I need to withdraw the money in advance. Carly's overly cheerful voice answered, First of all, Carly, let's get this sorted out. I need enough money to keep the house in working order and cover expenses for a while. Will only the funds in our current account be blocked? Yes, Carly clarified. But I think he already changed it last week when he quit his job. What should we do? Oh no, I said, my frustration mounting. I want to close all our accounts and transfer the money to a new one. Are you sure you want to withdraw all the money? She asked. Absolutely, I confirmed. Mark will find a new job faster than Tina can eat a bucket of chicken wings. This is all the money I have until the divorce is finalized, I added. You will need to write a check for this amount and then transfer it to your new account, Carly explained. Okay, I snapped. Just do it. Consider it done, Carly replied. As soon as you arrive, I'll write you a check for $311 and you can continue. What? I asked, stunned. Carly, there's almost $500,000 in this account. She hesitated, then said, I know perfectly well how many are in there. I was furious. This has to be a violation of the law. The sheriff spoke up. It's not illegal, he explained, but it's definitely unfair. The bank adheres to a policy that requires maintaining a minimum balance. If your balance drops below $50, you'll be charged a fee of $10. And you don't even have the money left to cover the commission. CJ handed me the phone, and I began talking to my lawyer, my voice choking with tears. Mark sold the house, emptied our bank accounts, and liquidated all our investments. When I checked our investment account, I found that Mark cashed out all but one of the cheese company shares. Very clever, my lawyer commented. He beat you to it. Everything is within the law until the divorce process begins. He can do whatever he wants with his assets. It looks like he's planning to cash out and hide his money in offshore accounts to make it harder for us to access. I shook my head. His goal is to increase his fortune so that I don't receive any financial support during the divorce. His decision to quit his job is a well-thought-out strategy. By appearing in court without money or work, he'll be able to easily separate from me without incurring any financial responsibility. I suspect he may not even show up for court since he looks like he's out of town. He dumped me before I could dump him, I added, tears welling up again. My lawyer asked, How are you going to hand him the divorce papers if you don't know where he is? I wondered aloud if it was possible to divorce him without all the difficulties. How about giving up the divorce? I asked, hoping for an easier solution. It takes 3 years in this state to do that, my lawyer replied. Do you have enough money to last that long? I angrily reminded him that Mark had taken all our money. Well, without funds, I can't afford your services, I said, cutting the conversation short. The beeping on the other end of the line echoed in my ears as I tried to process everything that had happened. The quiet giggles of the movers were the moment my life spiraled into complete chaos. With nowhere else to turn, I sought refuge at my mother's house. Mark, my ex-husband, wasted no time getting rid of all our belongings. Carefully, he either sold them or gave them away without a second thought. Both his expensive Mustangs and his trusty winter Jeep were taken, leaving me only with my new Lexus. However, I soon realized that I couldn't handle the car payments, and it was eventually confiscated. Desperate for help, I turned to several pro bono lawyers. After hearing the details of my situation, almost all of them came to the same conclusion. I needed to create serious problems to resist his actions. Mark had acted smartly and within the law, Marriage doesn't legally oblige a man to stay with his wife, and there is no rule prohibiting the sale of a jointly owned house. Mark had every right to access funds from our accounts as the owner of the main account. In this situation, he had emerged victorious. Despite my attempts to contact him, his phone number was disconnected. I was sure he had left me a clue, but I had been too inattentive to notice it. Days passed without any word from him, which turned into weeks, then months. In the first month, I lost CJ too. He was trying to earn enough for an apartment after his girlfriend dumped him on the same day Mark disappeared. It seemed like an incredible coincidence. One day, as I was listening to the radio, I couldn't hold back my tears. The Eagles, a band I barely knew, had a song performed by Glenn Frey that struck a deep chord within me. The lyrics he had whispered or sung to me on that fateful day echoed in my mind, and I couldn't help but cry. My days were filled with grueling work. I cleaned hotel rooms 6 days a week with my mother. The guests we served often reminded me of my former life. I used to take my benefits for granted, believing I deserved more. But after a few days of struggling to make ends meet, I began to feel remorse for how I treated Mark. I remembered how I used to spend more on cosmetics every 2 weeks than my current salary. I felt regret. At 43, I felt like my options were limited. Strangely, after 3 years of hardship and poor nutrition, I gained weight and stopped dyeing my hair. One day, I returned home to find an invitation waiting for me. The next day, I went to the nearby cafe. I discovered that the message was from Mark. Though it wasn't signed, I realized that Mark could have taken all our money. But instead, he left an unusual amount, $311. It had been 3 years, 1 month, and 1 week since he had dumped me. At that moment, I realized that my punishment was over. I regretted not realizing this sooner because I could have focused on losing weight and getting back in shape. But in the end, it didn't matter. Mark had always loved me for who I was, with my blonde hair and big breasts. While I had always tried to look presentable, I now understood. The words of the song Mark had sung to me before he left suddenly echoed in my head again. We've come full circle. I'm ready to give you what you want. The meaning of the invitation became clear. It was a symbol of separation, but also a chance for reconciliation. Mark was ready to accept me back into his life. In that moment, I realized my mistake. The power had always been in my hands. I had waited listlessly for something to change, but Mark had always tried to fulfill my wishes. He did everything possible to make me happy, yet stood his ground when I pressured him to do something that didn't suit him. When I decided to end the marriage, he took it as a personal insult. Surprisingly, it was he who initiated the divorce. Despite the years I had spent waiting for the end of our relationship, I never received the expected divorce papers. Now, it seemed I understood the reason. Mark still loved me, and I was looking forward to our reunion. As I sat at my table, CJ approached me, looking disheveled and smelling of alcohol. "You've gained weight," he commented. "How many donuts have you eaten? Have you drunk enough to forget about your flaws? What brings you here?" I asked. "I thought you worked here." "I got an invitation to have lunch at the cafe across the street," he explained. "I came here to gain courage." "Strange," he remarked. "Seems like too much of a coincidence." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. He leaned closer and said, "I also received an invitation." I looked at him, unsure of what he meant. "Is there a secret in yours?" he asked. "It wasn't a secret," I replied. "It was Mark's way of showing he wanted me back." "What exactly was written in the invitation?" he asked. I read it aloud. "We've come full circle. I'm ready to give you what you want." "You're right," he said. "Yours is different from mine." In my note, there was a question. Why does a squirrel hide nuts in a nest? To be honest, I have no idea, I said, laughing at the oddness of it all. I think this is a sign that Shannon wants me back, CJ concluded. Squirrels hide nuts to protect them from birds, he said, pausing. And this is a metaphor for women. Shannon made it clear that she didn't want me with other women. I think they conspired to bring us together after all this time. Frustration bubbled up inside me, and I screamed, throwing away everything I had learned in the past 3 years. If Mark wants me back, he's going to have to make a serious effort, I declared, pulling myself together. Determined, I left the bar and headed to the cafe across the street. As I sat down at a small table, I glanced around and saw CJ enter the cafe. He sat at the next table, surrounded by 2 college guys who were engrossed in a game, their bags scattered around. I studied CJ's confused expression, realizing what his mistake was. Despite my frantic flailing, he was too wrapped up in talking to the other guys to notice me. Later, when he took a seat, the guy's bag slipped out of control and flew in his direction, knocking over his glass. Enraged, CJ stood up but was immediately hit in the groin by another bag falling from the table. One of the guys tried to throw it back up, but missed. Unfortunately, his foot slammed into CJ's knees, and CJ let out a loud scream. I rushed over to him as the waiters tried to help, but all they could do was assist him in standing up. When the ambulance arrived to take him to the hospital, I explained to him that he had misunderstood everything. Despite his pain, he asked, "What do you mean?" I replied, "It wasn't about the birds, CJ. It was about the reproductive organs." He muttered something under his breath, but was interrupted by the sudden appearance of a tall, blonde college student. She came up to me, chewing gum and holding a briefcase. "Are you Clayton?" she asked. "Yes," I replied sharply. She handed me a stack of papers and said, "This is a list of his demands. Why don't you ask him yourself?" She hissed before walking away. I looked around the cafe and saw him, Mark. The meaning of the riddle became clear to me in an instant. A full circle didn't necessarily mean Mark's return. It meant the fulfillment of my desires. This realization came to me after Mark and I divorced after our breakup. The life I once had and lost was what I truly longed for. I missed a simple life and, above all, longed for a reunion with Mark. And there he was right in front of me. He looked good, better than the last time I saw him. He looked happy and content, but he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him, young, red-haired, and clearly pregnant. Between them sat a little girl, holding their hands. She had Mark's hair color and her mother's bright green eyes. The girl wore Mark's unique smile. Maybe she inherited it from him. As soon as I saw them together, deep down, I knew that this was the end. Trying to maintain a relationship with Mark was useless. He was emotionally detached now. There was no point in trying to win back his love. The redhead had captured his heart by offering him love, companionship, and even children. I looked down at the divorce papers and saw Mark's obvious hostility towards me. My goal had been to get financial compensation through the judicial system. I needed his money, not him. But in the end, I didn't get either. He divorced me, citing the fact that he had left me, which allowed him to keep all his possessions and start a new life without any ties to me. Story 2. My best friend Simon tried to persuade me to join the army, joking that he would travel the world, meet interesting people, and then destroy them. Despite the dark humor, I decided to join the same unit as him and even volunteered for the Special Forces unit where he served. The intense training sessions were difficult, but with Simon by my side, they were bearable. Our group was sent to a bustling city where life seemed relatively calm. It was there that I found love and quickly married my beloved Pam. She became my life partner, and together, we had 2 beautiful daughters, Kate and Melissa, aged 6 and 5. I had served for 10 years and had been happily married for 8. Unlike other Army units, mine did not require frequent deployments. We would leave for a few days or up to 2 weeks at a time, but not often. I was lucky. Home was where I was most of the time, almost every day of the year. Life was as ordinary and stable as it could be. At one point, I was married to a woman I adored, with a family that meant everything to me. But everything changed when Osama bin Laden carried out the horrific terrorist attack. My friend Simon and I were asked to deploy to Iraq the same year. Saying goodbye to our loved ones was difficult, but Pam and I took responsibility. While we performed our duties during the preparation and invasion, we looked forward to coming back home. Our anticipation faded when we received an order from the regimental commander of the political department to stay in Iraq and continue the fight to preserve peace. Simon, known for his wit, couldn't resist teasing the politician. "Sir, fighting for peace is like trying to preserve innocence by having sexual intercourse," he grumbled. The room burst into laughter, and the speaker left in despair. We had no idea that the world would turn out to be more brutal than the offensive itself. Unlike the invasion, where the enemy wore uniforms, peacekeeping operations were far more dangerous. Our unit spent weeks behind enemy lines, returning to base for just 2 weeks of respite. It was impossible to pinpoint our exact location, and the uncertainty hung over us, as we never knew when we'd be able to return home. To stay connected with my family, I went on Skype every night to chat with Pam, Kate, and Melissa. It was my way of ensuring they wouldn't forget my face during my absence. But 3 weeks into our last mission, the situation worsened. We were assigned to attack a base rumored to have 100 enemy soldiers. Instead, we faced about 1,000, vastly outnumbering our group of 12. We made a quick decision and hastily retreated. 2 days later, Blackhawks came to evacuate us, but by that time, only 4 of us could walk. Unfortunately, 3 of our comrades had died. The heaviest blow fell on Simon, who had injured the tendons in the back of his knee. Although it wasn't life-threatening, his military career was over. He was sent to the hospital in our hometown with the other wounded, while we stayed behind in a village to recover and reintegrate back into society. After such a devastating loss, it was crucial for us to prioritize our psychological health. Everyone knew that the morale of our group had been shaken. History shows that when a military unit loses more than 10% of its personnel, morale can suffer drastically. This may explain why Roman officers resorted to drastic measures like killing 1 in 10 soldiers to maintain discipline. Though cruel, it was effective in keeping the cohesion of the troops. Roman legions rarely fled battles, even in the toughest times. 9 months after returning, I found myself in the dining room, using my laptop to send a letter to one of the widows of a deceased comrade. I had been trying to contact all 3 widows since the Army had officially informed them of their husbands' deaths. While the Army followed its bureaucratic procedures, our unit stayed cohesive, and I wanted to take a more personal approach to show my support for these women, whom I knew personally. The 3rd conversation turned out to be the hardest for me. In the previous 2 conversations, I had honestly told them that their husbands had passed away quickly and painlessly. But this time I had to fabricate a story. As the senior officer in my platoon, I had taken on the responsibility of communicating with the women who had lost their husbands. If they were to be deceived, it had to be a consistent deception on my part. Suddenly, a small Skype message appeared on my laptop screen. "Kate Young is online." I needed a break from the emotionally draining task, so I quickly dialed her number. A few seconds later, my eldest daughter's sweet face appeared on the screen. She was sitting on the couch in our living room, with the laptop she had received last Christmas. "Dad," she squeaked, and her sister soon joined the conversation. For the next 30 minutes, I talked with the 2 most important reasons for my life. We laughed, and they talked to me as fast as they could, making the stress of the moment melt away. As I chatted with my daughters about school, their recent trip to the zoo, and various other topics, I felt the tension slowly begin to ease. The overwhelming urge to lash out at someone was gradually fading. But when I glanced at my watch, I realized it was time for them to go to bed. Trying to wrap up our conversation, I asked, "Where's your mom?" "She's in the kitchen with Uncle Nick," Mel replied, and my heart skipped a beat. Kate had mentioned that Uncle Nick had gone to the zoo with them today. Pam and I knew we didn't have a brother named Nick. A chill ran down my spine as anxiety surged within me. I tried to suppress the panic that was rising and spoke as calmly as I could. "How long has Uncle Nick been coming to the house?" "Not long, I think," Mel answered. "Wasn't it right after Easter, Dad?" 2 months ago." Pam's silence about new friends told me everything I needed to know. I asked how often Mom saw Uncle Nick and was told that he was almost always around. That's when I heard Kate whispering off-screen, "Mom doesn't want us talking about Uncle Nick." My suspicions turned into certainty, and anger flared up in me. I tried my best to remain composed. "Kate, come to the screen," I demanded. Kate looked puzzled. "Is Uncle staying the night?" I asked. "Yes, Daddy." The confirmation made my blood run cold. I struggled to contain my emotions. "You have a good relationship with Uncle Nick, don't you?" I asked. Both girls answered simultaneously. It was hard to hear both of them at once, but I caught the words "slippery" and "he hit me" and "doesn't like us." "Okay, girls, be quiet now. Kate, you first," I said, my voice firm. "No, Dad, we don't love him, and he doesn't care about us," Kate said, her voice barely a whisper. "When Mom's not around, he treats us badly. I think he hurts her sometimes. I hear her scream when he stays the night." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. It was painful to hear this from my own child. Serving in the Army had taught me how to think quickly in high-pressure situations. I had developed a skill for handling life-threatening circumstances, but this was different. "Does this jacket belong to Nick?" I asked, trying to steady myself. "Yes, Dad," Kate replied. "Can I take it and check if there's a wallet in one of the pockets?" Kate quickly followed my instructions. 5 minutes later, I had Nick's full name, address, license number, and his employer's security card. Kate helped me find details about his car, including the make, model, and license plate number. "Okay, girls, I need to make a quick phone call. Please keep the screens on and wait for my return," I instructed. The call lasted more than 10 minutes, but fortunately, Simon's wife, Julia, was home and didn't have to go to the hospital. I returned to my computer and invited the girls closer. "Hey, my lovely princesses, would you like to stay at Aunt Julia's house for a few days?" They always looked forward to spending time with Julia and Simon's kids, who were about the same age. "Dad, we haven't seen them in ages," Mel exclaimed. Pam had been avoiding our friends, I thought. "Well, go to your rooms and pack your clothes and toys for a few days. Aunt Julia will pick you up soon. Kate, could you take the laptop to the kitchen and show Mom the screen? I need to talk to her. After that, you can pack your things." "Okay, Dad," Kate replied. Kate took the laptop to the kitchen. I saw Pam and a young man sitting at the table with a bottle of wine. They were so engrossed in conversation that they didn't notice Kate put the laptop on the table until she said, "Mom, Dad wants to talk to you." Both of them turned abruptly. Shock was evident on their faces, and fear was clear on Pam's. The man looked like he wanted to disappear under the table. "Hi, Pam. How are you?" I greeted her, acknowledging the presence of her new companion, Nick. Their mouths moved, but no words came out. I pressed on. "Come on, Pam. You should have known this day would come. Didn't you prepare an explanation for me?" It was clear she had been trying to deceive me. She stumbled over her words. "He's just a friend of Dave's," Pam insisted. But I didn't buy it. The girls had already spilled the truth about her secret relationship with him. Finally, Pam relented. "I'm sorry, Dave, but I felt incredibly lonely in your absence. I met Nick, and we developed feelings for each other." I remained silent for a moment, trying to keep my composure. I wanted to get angry, but I knew it wouldn't solve anything. "That's not true, Pam. This is the longest absence I've had in the 9 years of our marriage," I said, my voice shaking with frustration. "I warned you about the difficulties we'd face. The wedding, and you agreed," I said, my voice calm but firm. Pam looked confused by my words. "I must say, my dear, the best thing would have been to wait until I was home in a country where any distraction could be fatal, and then inform me of your desire to leave, giving me a chance to change my mind. We could have officially ended our relationship before you took a lover. Unfortunately, Dave, the ship has already sailed." Pam tried to intervene, her voice trembling. "And what's going to happen next, Pam? Are you seriously going to leave me and run off into the sunset with that idiot?" She couldn't even look up, only nodding in response. And then, as if confirming my darkest fear, she spoke again. "In your little dream, you're just going to take my kids away from me, aren't you?" The way I was talking must have hit a nerve because she visibly flinched. It was clear that the thought of not being able to take my children hadn't even crossed her mind. "Listen, Pam," I began, trying to steady my emotions. "You know I study psychology. Do you remember all those conversations we had about what shapes children, nature or upbringing, genetics or environment? And what happens if the children go with you? They'll inherit your treacherous genes and be raised in a world of dishonesty and immorality. Believe me, this cannot be allowed." Pam recoiled in shock at my harsh words. Finally, the idiot stood up for her. "Wait! Shut up, you idiot!" I snapped, my voice hardening. Another skill the Army had taught me was the ability to quickly assert control over someone in opposition. He stopped talking immediately, distracted by something on the screen. Pam, ready to leave, stood up. "Wait," I ordered. "Julia's here to pick up the kids. She'll take them to her house for the night and send them to school in the morning. I need you to make sure they've packed everything they need before they go." Pam got up from her seat, and Nick tried to follow her example. "Sit down, you idiot," I barked. He quickly complied, sitting back down and nursing the bruised back of his head. I kept my face calm as I waited for Pam to return. After a long absence, she came back, apologizing profusely. I cut her off. "I have 2 questions for Nick. First, did you know she was married?" His answer, that he was in love with her, was enough for me to say, yes. The second question was about my profession. Pam said I served in the Iraqi Air Force, but I'm going to correct her. I actually served in the Army. There seemed to be some confusion, though, because Pam thought I was a pilot. I clarified, I served in the Army in a regiment known as the Special Air Service, or SAS. Seeing Nick's lack of recognition, I added, "We're commonly known as the SAS." The look of horror on his face told me he had finally grasped the gravity of the situation. The reputation of the SAS was known worldwide as an elite force that trained special forces from around the globe. There were rumors that, once you joined the SAS, you wouldn't even realize it until you were brought before the court of Lucifer himself. Nick finally understood the weight of his situation. Although the microphone didn't pick up any sound, his lips unmistakably formed a curse word. At that moment, Mr. Nick Brown of Borderdale Pender Court number 12 realized he was in big trouble. "I destroy the bad guys," I said, moving closer to the screen, my face filling the frame. His expression was pitiful, his complexion pale. "For sleeping with my wife, ruining my marriage and endangering the future of my daughters. I sentenced him coldly. I hold you responsible. What? He stuttered, his mouth moving like a fish gasping for air. Yes, I'm going to kill you, I repeated, my voice dark with intent. Before I could act, Pam intervened, her voice casual but sharp. Dave, let's be honest here. Macho man, I know you're a military guy, but how many people have you really destroyed? Her tone took me by surprise, and I shifted my attention from Nick's trembling face to Pam's defiant expression. It suddenly dawned on me. She had no idea about the real scope of my work. Like many in the Special Forces, I had kept my job a secret. Only our inner circle knew about my participation in the SAS. Instead of exploding in anger, I calmly replied, I've been at the base for the last week, so I didn't have to destroy anyone. But the week before that, I destroyed about 10 or 12 opponents. It was a relatively quiet week. I didn't keep track of the exact number because, at that moment, it didn't seem significant. Pam's face was full of surprise as I continued. Most of them were shot, but one man caught me off guard while I was reloading. I had to defend myself by stabbing him. I aimed upward, piercing his heart through the diaphragm. They say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. I watched Nick, a man now filled with intense fear. Honey, it's important for you to understand that I don't hold any bad feelings toward these people. They were just doing their job, I said, trying to stay calm. I didn't feel any remorse for the men I destroyed, even when I witnessed their deaths. But just imagine what I do to those I sincerely despise. Noticing Nick's fear, I shifted my attention to him. Are you still staying here, you idiot? The further away from my house, the better your chances of survival. Rest assured, my blade is meant for you, and it's an oath you will never forget. With a loud exclamation, Nick jumped up from his chair and ran out of the room. I heard the door slam. Now Pam, sitting there, looked like a goldfish, her expression one of suffering. I gave her time to recover, knowing her thoughts were likely far from positive. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Are you going to destroy me too? Her question made me pause. I hadn't decided her fate yet. I haven't made a decision yet, Pam, I answered, keeping my tone controlled. But I know one thing for sure. After you allowed this unsuitable person into my house and started sleeping with him, with even my daughters hearing it, it became clear that you were not fit to be the mother of our children. Kate told me about the disturbing sounds she heard when he was with you at night, and she's worried he might harm you. Pam's already terrified expression turned into one of sheer horror as she heard this revelation. One thing is for sure, I continued. My daughters will grow up with a deep understanding of how I feel about infidelity. I gathered my thoughts and shifted from emotional anger to a more logical perspective. Studies have shown that the death of one parent can sometimes have less impact on children than the upheaval of divorce. Pam stayed silent as she understood exactly what this statement meant. Two unpleasant options, neither of which were appealing. No, Pam, I said, finally softening. I think it would be unacceptable to harm you. I care about you, and up until now, I have no reason to consider you a bad mother. But listen, if I find Nick one day and you're with him, I won't hesitate to hurt you too. Going to the police won't save you. And if you don't prepare the divorce papers for me to sign when I get home, the consequences will be severe. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Do some research, Pam. Many criminals were convicted without their bodies ever being found. Rest assured, your case won't be an exception. I watched as understanding slowly dawned on her face. She seemed on the verge of breaking down. Are you really going to kill Nick? She asked, her voice barely audible. I took a deep breath before replying. This country has changed me. I've seen too many deaths, taken too many lives to have any semblance of humanity left. When I finish with Nick, I won't feel guilty." Pam's eyes filled with tears. "For the first time, I just wanted it all to end." "Remember this, Pam," I warned her. "If you had behaved differently, maybe I would have understood. After the divorce, I will get the house and full custody of the children. The visitation schedule will be determined by me, because I believe it's in the best interests of the children. After I return, you'll have to find a new place to live, but I'll help you with living expenses for a reasonable period until you can get back on your feet. I'll give you the details of an army lawyer since civilian judges usually speak well of them. After I get back, I plan to work as an instructor at the base, so I can be home with our daughters every evening." I looked at her one last time. "We'll do fine without you," I said, my voice resolute. "I've decided I won't come back here anymore." Before I left, I worried about how I'd handle the situation, but I quickly realized that wasn't a concern anymore. Now, I was more concerned about how taking more lives would weigh on my soul. It was a heavy burden. "Good night, Pam. Please don't contact me by email or phone until I return. I don't want any surprises waiting for me when I get back. Just follow my instructions, and you will soon find happiness, though it may not be the life you once imagined. You made your decision, and now it's time to face the consequences." That was the end of the conversation. 3 weeks later, I returned home and was glad to see Kate and Mel. I tried to explain that their mother would no longer live with us, but they were at a loss. The presence of Julia, Simon, and their children helped distract them. Whenever Kate and Mel saw Simon, they'd ask why he was walking strangely, and Simon would always come up with a new, more fantastic story to entertain them. When I got off the plane, the police were waiting for me. They informed me they had spoken to Pam, but she hadn't confirmed my story. I didn't use any clever evasion techniques, but I didn't admit to anything either. As a result, they couldn't do anything except warn me that they would be watching my actions. The immature minds of the children rightly blamed Pam for the pain we all felt, and they seemed to avoid her at all costs. It wasn't until later that I discovered Julia's role in this. She picked them up from school every day, allowing them to spend time with their old friends, Julia and Simon's children. This left little time for Pam, whose frustration and disinterest grew. Pam asked about the possibility of reconciliation, but I just let the cold, heartless part of me take over. I stared at her in silence. After that conversation, we never discussed it again. Pam made sure we were never alone together. It was clear I had scared her. I found a job as an instructor at the base, which allowed me to be home every evening. Despite our efforts to co-parent, the emotional impact of divorce remained ever-present. Psychologists advise parents to stay together unless there's cruelty involved, but life moved on. Things seemed to settle, and months passed by, each day a little easier to bear. 2 months later, Percy Newmont finally found peace. He spent time hunting in the wilderness with friends, using a bow, not thinking about his past mistakes. Hours passed in quiet contemplation, and life felt good. He was grateful for the camaraderie of his friends, especially Peter, who shared in his adventures. However, the guilt from betraying Peter still lingered in Percy's mind. The night he slept with Peter's wife, betraying the trust of the one man he had cared about most. Percy had moved across 2 states, trying to start fresh with a new identity. It was a tough journey, one that had drained him financially, but eventually things began to fall into place. Returning to Borderdale last month for his mother's funeral, he knew it was a risky decision. Hiding in the church and avoiding contact with relatives made him feel foolish, but he couldn't ignore the fact that she was his mother. Suddenly, a sharp blow knocked Percy onto his back. He was confused as an arrow lodged in his chest, just below his heart. He looked up, trying to understand what was happening. His 3 friends were behind him, so why did he feel the blow from the front? He lost consciousness only to regain it later, finding himself alone with Peter. The others had gone for help. The sharp pain returned, and he flinched, only to see Peter grinning as he pulled the feathers out of the arrow. The agony became unbearable, and Percy lost consciousness again. 10 minutes later, he succumbed to his injuries. The coroner, as usual, showed little reverence for the body, as it was just another casualty of what he considered a hunting accident. 2 weeks later, Pam sat alone in her 12th-floor apartment, tears streaming down her face. She had been crying for 3 hours, ever since her lover John left her. "What's wrong with me?" she mused, feeling lost and broken. Reflecting on the past 4 years, Pam realized she had blamed Nick for everything. Pressured by her biological clock, she had rushed into marriage with me to satisfy her desire to have children. But when Nick came into her life, she saw a chance to start over with a new partner and have children without hesitation. She rushed into the relationship but soon realized Nick didn't feel the same. He had disappeared without a trace, and it became clear to her that their love had never been mutual. Pam was devastated to find that Nick had left behind his jacket and wallet. Desperate for answers, she searched for him for 2 days after his disappearance, but he was nowhere to be found. The most painful realization was that he didn't seem to care about her at all. The following year, her children became the main cause of her depression. She had just started legal proceedings to regain custody of Kate and Mel when I returned from Iraq and stopped the process. Pam tried to contact the girls, but each time she was disappointed. They seemed resentful, as if they blamed her for something. She only saw them about once a week, until a woman moved in with me, just 9 months after Pam left. The woman, a journalist who had covered the story of me and my friends receiving medals, became a significant presence in our lives. The girls stopped talking to Pam on the phone. Pam's pain deepened when she saw them running up to the woman, hugging her as if she were their mother. They didn't even call Pam on her birthday that year. Her pain began to subside when she met Pete, an older man who shared her desire for a family. They moved in together 8 months later and began discussing marriage and children. But 2 weeks later, Pete confessed that he had found someone else and asked Pam to leave. A similar situation occurred the following year with Randy. They quickly bonded, moved in together, and after 4 months, Randy broke off the relationship to reconcile with his ex-wife. Pam decided to have a series of one-night stands in an attempt to boost her self-confidence. But rather than feeling empowered, she found herself even more lost and devastated. She dreamed of finding happiness, but the men she turned to never stayed. Pam had resisted settling down with John for a long time, fully aware that time was slipping away when it came to having children. But after a year of gentle persuasion, she finally succumbed and allowed him to move in with her. Though doubts still lingered in her heart, she admitted that being close to John was the most pleasant thing she had experienced since being with me. When she returned home from work one evening, John was waiting for her at the door of the apartment, holding her packed things. Without offering any explanation, he simply told her that he was leaving. Avoiding any contact, he picked up his bags and walked out the door. As he carried out the last one, he muttered, "Goodbye, girl," leaving her confused and offended. She had not been unfaithful to him, yet his departure felt like an unforgivable betrayal. Wiping away her tears, Pam glanced at the unopened mail on the coffee table. Among the letters was one empty envelope. Despite her desire to read the mysterious message inside, she managed to resist the temptation for a time. But once John had left, unable to contain her curiosity any longer, she finally opened the envelope. Inside was a newspaper clipping that puzzled her. The article told the tragic story of a hunter who had died from an arrow strike. She couldn't understand why anyone would want to share such a dark story with her. But as she read on, her confusion turned to shock. The victim was none other than Nick Brown, a resident of Borderdale. The newspaper slipped from her trembling fingers as the realization hit her. Nick was dead. The shock sent her mind spinning. She thought of Nick, then Pete, then Randy, men who had come and gone from her life. But eventually her thoughts settled on me. She tried to convince herself that she wasn't thinking about me, but deep down, she knew she was. Years ago, she had everything, but in trying to find the last piece of herself, she had lost it all. Shocked by the realization, she looked through the sliding door to the balcony and gazed out at the sprawling parking lot 12 floors below. The view was both huge and mesmerizing. It was then that she understood. She was the only one to blame for her misfortune. She needed to move on from it. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to JK Tells a Story for more tales.